depending on where you are. My name is Florian Stiegers. I'm originally Dutch. I live in San Francisco, and I'm a product manager on the Viva Insights team. I'm passionate about using people analytics and organizational network analysis to create insights around topics such as hybrid work, but I'm also focused on scenarios such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as a new hire onboarding, and yeah, a vast amount of scenarios. So looking forward to a lively discussion on this topic today. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Noah.
Thanks, Florine. My name is Noah Eisenberg. I am what is called a global product specialist. I focus on modern work and modern work tools. For the Canada region, I am based outside of New York in South Norwalk, Connecticut. I'm broadcasting from my home office today. I am a boomerang to Microsoft. I actually started my career at Microsoft in the late 90s. I was here for 10 years. And then I went out into the HR tech startup world. And I came back to Microsoft about almost 2 years ago to help the organization forward this new experience platform. Over the last almost 2 years, I've had the great pleasure of working very closely with Florine across many accounts in North America to talk to them specifically about not just what their experience was through COVID, but what being in this new environment of hybrid work actually means to them, and how looking at organizational data can actually help inform the practices that will help nudge the organization back to a more healthy state, right? We all went through very different things through COVID. So I'm delighted to be here. I love being able to have, over 50 customers in one place. It's why I came back to Microsoft. So thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present to you today.
Awesome. Nova, would you like to take the control and proceed
Sure.
further? Awesome.
I'm more than happy to. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing my speaker notes on the right-hand side, JOT.
Do you want to take, I guess once you take the control, you would be able to see.
Okay, so let me just take control. Just one second. Okay, and let me close the chat.
Okay.
And view. That is interesting. For some reason, I am not seeing my notes. Let me.
Do you want to share your screen in that
Yeah,
case?
I think that would be much better,
sure.
because then I could, there's so many statistics that I want to share with the group that I want to make sure that I can.
No worries. Please feel free to. Do you want me to stop sharing and so that you can share it?
Yes, that would be terrific.
Okay, no worries.
And I just have to do a. You know what? It's okay, JOT. I have my notes to the right of me, so it's fine. I don't want to slow us down, so it's fine. I'm not sure why the notes weren't coming up. It's probably because you were sharing the deck, but it's okay. We can proceed. So why don't you reshare?
Yeah, sure.
And then I'll take control again.
Okay.
Thanks. In the meantime, let me just start to talking about where we're going to lead off from. So as I mentioned to you, part of the reason I came back to Microsoft was because I wanted to help forward this new agenda that we've brought to market, really focused on the employee experience. Traditionally, Microsoft has been focused very much on architecture, right? Exchange, SQL, and such. And what we realized through COVID is that we had an opportunity to inform the business about some of the hybrid work trends and challenges that we're seeing. So we're going to talk to you today. I'll start the conversation sharing with you what we've learned, why it matters to your organizations. Many of you have started to adopt Viva Insights at the organizational level or at the personal level. We're going to share with you some of what we've seen. And then we're going to talk more specifically, and Florine will take over, really talking more about what have we built into the hybrid work functionality within the reporting that you can do in Power BI. It's one of the most interesting features and one of the most interesting things that we've done as we've kind of grounded ourselves in the research. And it's important that we help you understand the mindset shift in addition to the organizational shift that we're seeing. We'll be taking a poll throughout, right? Because we want to make sure that we can synergize not just our time, but the resources that are supporting you. And we'll finish with some time for Q&A as well. So let's start with the Microsoft Work Trend Index. We know that the recent macroeconomic pressures and this once in a generational shift that we'd had to do with the way that we're working in a labor market that remains incredibly tight is really top of mind to all of us today. So as we're now well into hybrid work, and we certainly recognize that the managers and leaders and the employees have different perspectives about how flexible work is going, many of us still yearn for the same experience and that same feeling of connection and working within a collaborative environment that we had in 2019, right? The water cooler conversations seem to have disappeared. Managers have different expectations of how the employees want to work, and we have great empathy for both. So today we're going to take you through some of the ways that advanced analytics can help support the organizations and the leaders, and how we can use this to nudge your behaviors back into ones that will create a healthy organization and a win-win-win for everyone. So as we ground ourselves in the research back in 2021, this is what we released after a year of observing how collecting signals and productivity signals specifically within our environments. We researched 30,000 people in 31 countries, and our amazing team from Microsoft Research pulled together not just data that from signals that we were reading in 365, but they also included the latest research from LinkedIn labor market trends and Glint People Science. So what has emerged is the Work Trend Index. And I'm just going to share a couple really interesting statistics, which when I'm having conversations with customers, always help to set why we have to shift the mindset, right? So if you observe some of the statistics here, you'll see that we have a very good understanding of how the pandemic has affected employees, right? For the first time, we've seen more than half of employees likely to prioritize health and well-being over the pandemic. And I would suspect to say that it's actually growing higher, right? Because not everybody has the balance of flexible work. Many people, myself included, are still struggling with fighting the burnout versus bringing productivity. And the reason that we're fighting and we're having that internal struggle as employees is because in addition to this increased desire to put health and wellness, mental health especially first, we know how the pandemic greatly affected employees. We're seeing a 252% increase in time spent in Teams meetings on an individual level. That's an average of those 30,000. That's a glaring tipping of the scales as I see, because that's where the expectations are shifting, and that's why managers feel so wedged in the middle. In addition, if you look at this third glaring statistic, that more than half of the population across 2 generations is going to make a change in where they work, and that's up 3% from previous research. So we not just have employees' expectations and manager and organizational needs very different, but we also have a talent shift that's going on in the middle across 2 different generations. And we know that we now have 4 generations left in the workforce. We lost a lot of that 5th generation over retirement, unfortunately, due to COVID, or a combination of both. So now we have to look at how are we understanding, but also forwarding to these generations that are left in the workforce, understanding that we have a seesaw and then we have some friction in the middle. I'm an efficiency junkie, and I talk about corporate friction and personal friction, and how can technology help us come to more of a common ground. And this is kind of what we learned, is that the trends haven't really changed that much. We're all still struggling with some of the same stuff, but now we're looking to solve for it very, very differently, because we're in a once in a lifetime opportunity. And it's almost like every one of our organizations is its own social experiment, right? And that's been my experience talking to different groups. And what I've seen is that we're all contending with either all 5 of these, depending on the organization, or bits and pieces, depending on how our culture morphed through COVID. So I want to share it with you just to inform you and to set your intention about what you're going to see Florine put in front of you, because the reports that you are going to see have emerged from us listening to this research and helping you answer questions where those gaps exist. So when we're thinking about coming to work, the first pillar here, employees have a new worth it equation. And I joke often, and I say the reason they can have that new worth it equation is because they delivered during COVID. Companies didn't tank when their employees stood up and had good leadership to help them succeed. It became that win-win transform, as I call it. But we still have managers who are wedged because of those two statistics that I showed you, because the employees are saying, hey, we did a really good job. We need the flexibility. We want to come into work when it's meaningful to us. We don't want to sit in the office behind a screen in an office if we're going to be on Teams meetings all day long. Make it meaningful. So the managers want to meet those expectations, but at the same time, we need to kind of understand what the organizations are asking of the managers. Just to the chat, you should see a slide right now that has a parachute and 5 different pillars. Are you seeing that? You're not.
Not seeing.
Okay. We should be
Wait a
on
minute.
slide 16, JOT.
Okay, sorry. I went
That's
a little
okay.
ahead. Yep.
No problem. I'm happy to start
Yep.
over. So
Yep.
thank you, Jane. I appreciate your teamwork. So employees, I was talking about that new worth it equation, right? They now have the opportunity to say, we need you to shift, right? We delivered, or in order for us to deliver, we need you to take certain things into account. That's this worth it equation that we talk about in the research. Like I said, based on the statistics that I shared, there's also other statistics that show that in that increase of 252%, we have a 153% increase per person in time spent in those meetings. We're also seeing a 28% increase in overtime hours, time outside of normal work hours, and a 14% increase on the weekends. So employees are working harder than ever. Managers are not necessarily convinced. There is a productivity paranoia because managers feel if they can't see it, it's not happening. So instead, what we're seeing is this morphing into managers and leaders being the pivotal point of being able to bring positivity and transformation to the organization, saying, hey, let's understand what your collaboration patterns look like so we can make educated and informed decisions about what days you can collaborate together in the office. So if we can read the signals, and we can do this, and we've helped customers do this, understand that Tuesdays and Thursdays are when your most strategic groups are signaling each other and collaborating the most. Let's make those days really exciting office days so they can collaborate in person, right? So leaders making the office worth the commute, flexible work, not always meaning that you're on, right? I will attest to this personally. We have to put our controls on ourselves that we end our workday within hours that are healthy for us. But we also have to be mindful that if we check in later on at night, maybe we put our kids to bed, maybe we're back from the gym, and we have some follow-up to do, why would we not delay the send on that email until the next morning so it doesn't interrupt the culture? It's okay if I want to work, but it's not okay for me to disrupt the flow, right? So we learn to shift the mindset. We also learn to say flexible work means I'm defining goals and objectives. I'm not working those 8 hours the same that I used to. So a manager shouldn't have to guess about productivity. They are now going to be able to see productivity in that flexible environment, and understanding that it's every space is the workspace is a good thing when your employee is generating an environment where they're thriving and they're producing for you. My last point is that rebuilding social capital, I will use myself as an example again, in a hybrid world is very different, right? So we have to balance between how are we connecting digitally, how are we connecting across global time zones, how are we collaborating, and how much time can we spend figuring that out? And when we have a system and an environment that is using AI to synergize our ability to connect, we can remove a lot of that friction and have the AI either secure a time within our calendar without us even trying, where we can collaborate and actually create plans that we manage to, and Florine's going to show that to you as well. So if you want to forward on to the next slide, and I'm going to wrap very quickly, I'm going to pass it over to Florine in about 5 minutes. But if we move to slide to the recent report that just came out, what's most important, you should all see the Work Trend Index Special Report, September 2022 now, is that we still have a very big gap. And I see that gap now as that 12% versus the 87% productivity. So 87% of employees are saying we are more productive now than before the pandemic, but only 12% of managers believe that. The statistics can't be that off. We have a gap here, and that is an informational gap. That is a data gap. And that's what we call productivity paranoia, right? So if we look at the fact that people are saying that they're productive, and 84% are saying, if we can have a good social connection, we'll come to the office more. So great. Figure out ways where you can kind of read the collaboration patterns and structure your return to work based on those patterns, because that's going to help you reduce how many employees are sitting at home burning out, right? Nearly half of employees surveyed said they're already burning out, right? If I don't take 5 to 7 minute micro breaks, I'll be in burnout mode by 3 p.m., full disclosure, because I've realized that if I take small breaks during the day, my brain can create space and I'm not overloading it with too much. Yes, this deck will be available, Tony. So as Satya so gracefully stated it at Ignite in 2022, just a couple months ago, that if we rely on dogma, we're going to make really bad decisions moving forward. But if we rely on data to help us understand where our gaps in healthy organizational health are, then we can lean in together as thought leaders in that organization to ask the right questions and to make that shift very intentional. So that shift that I'm talking about, right? We were in the pandemic, right? We had some data, some insights that we were able to collect, and we realized that if we made that mindset shift, and we leaned on these 3 things, embracing the flexibility that our employees are asking for, so we can reduce the weekend hours and the overtime hours. If we can address the meeting madness that's happening during the day, then we can reduce the hours and we can reduce the friction, and that'll create a healthier organization. How do we bring prioritization of well-being into the flow of work with technology? And how do we help our employees optimize and our organizations optimize by doing more with less? And we do that by moving from, next slide, from just an active understanding to an active and ambient understanding. And I spend so much of my time in the last couple of months talking about how it's important to create a formula that includes both. So it's not just about pulsing your organization and getting surveys that give you the color. You have to understand the context in which you're receiving that feedback. And by using ambient signals, by reading data, organizational data and signals and productivity signals within teams and within insights, and using social listening and watching how our organization aligns itself within its own social network, gives us a much better understanding of how we can foster those high-performing teams. I'm going to show you a couple more slides because I want to put you in a line of sight of where Florine's going to start to take you into a more specific and intentional demo. But just think about what happens if we could keep a pulse on an organization. What does it mean to be able to quickly understand collaboration patterns and be able to disseminate very quickly? Is our hybrid workforce burning out faster than the workforce that's coming into the office more? Are we seeing gaps? Are they learning better? Are they understanding better? Are they onboarding better, right? We can take an understanding of, are they coordinating, right? Florine's going to take the time to show you how we can use this information to create shared in-office day plans across geographies to help people work together and to understand when they're going to be in the office so that we can optimize that collaboration time as it relates to the groups that need to collaborate directly within the organization. And then lastly, how do we build healthy organizational habits, right? So I mentioned using something like delayed send, minimizing after hours interruptions, right? If I have an idea and I need to chat it to somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to receive it until they pick up the following morning. And this had an invaluable, and it was crazy when we turned this on at Microsoft, because we were our own social experiment. So we turned this on and we could not believe the dip that we saw because people were not feeling. And then we added little notes to the bottom of our email messages saying, my work hours may not be the same as yours. Please don't feel the need to respond if you receive a communication outside of your work hours, right? So we changed the mindset, we changed the culture, and then we did one more thing. We looked at the groups that were on the verge of burnout, and we researched them, and we got thought leaders from the business in with enablers from HRIS within Microsoft. And we said, all right, we're seeing this group collaborating, and this was the metric, more than 2 hours after a certain time in the evenings. And we were reaching a third peak. We knew that we had 2 peaks, before lunch and like right around 3 p.m. And we attributed that to before lunch and before people went to pick up their kids or run to the gym or maybe wrap their day. But then we started seeing a third peak. And that's the one that scared us because it was in a group that was incredibly strategic to the organization. And if we, the global black belts, started to burn out, there was going to be a very big part of the organization that was going to be at risk. So we had a conversation with managers and leaders. We had a conversation with the organization, and we decided to make Fridays no meeting Fridays for 90 days. And that was a signal that was thrown out to the business. And instead, we were able to reduce the friction and optimize more during those 4 days. Once we got that pattern in place, we were able to open up Fridays for meetings because we had regulated the business. Okay, so I am now going to turn it over to Florine. Florine's going to take some time showing you exactly what this means when you look at it with the dimensions of the challenges that I've just put on the slide in front of you. So Florine, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Noah, for touching on some of the hybrid work trends and the challenges and how they've been evolving over, I would say, like the past 3 years or so. I don't think the way we work ever has gone back to pre-pandemic. So all really interesting statistics. And thank you for addressing, how we're going to go about this. So before I'm going to talk a little bit more about specific product features, I'm actually very curious to hear from you. As a leader at your company, what are some of the greatest challenges that you face when it comes to managing a hybrid workplace? So we've set up a poll on this topic. Please take a few seconds and see if there's any challenges that resonate. And if there's any others, please feel free to elaborate in the chat. Terrific. So as these answers are starting to flow in, I'm curious to learn more about the answers in a minute. What I'm going to do is touch on one of the artifacts that we have available in the product today called the Hybrid Workforce Experience Power BI report. It's a report that's meant for business leaders, HR leaders, any leaders who is in charge of transformation or hybrid work models or programs. And typically, as a leader, you'll be supported by a business analyst or a Viva Insights analyst who has access to these reports and can help you get set up. The reports are available in the Viva Insights workbench. So what is this report about? The Hybrid Workforce Experience Power BI template is meant to help you understand how hybrid work affects the employee experience. The goal of the template is to help leaders create a more equitable experience for all employees, regardless of where and when they work, whether you work mostly on-site, in a hybrid mode, or mostly remote. So to do so, we cover out on 6 key topics in this template. The first topic is providing leaders with a baseline of where their workforce works, breaking down employees by work mode, if you will. Then in the subsequent pages, what we do is we start to layer on top that behavioral data from Viva Insights, and that's where it really starts to come alive. And it allows you to answer questions such as, how does hybrid work affect collaboration load across the week for various employees in different work modes? Or how is hybrid work impacting the employee networks and sense of belonging and connectedness? Or how does hybrid work impact the employee's ability to unplug or adopt flexible work schedules? The fifth card in this report also briefly touches on employee onboarding. As some of you may have experienced, remote onboarding can be plain hard. So this page tries to answer the question on whether new hires are getting that support they need in the first couple of months since on hire. And lastly, are employees getting the manager coaching and leadership support that they need in general? So now probably you're going to ask me, this all sounds great, but where do we get the data on whether someone works on site or remote or in a hybrid fashion? So for those of you who are familiar with our product, you're able to upload organizational data fields in Viva Insights. Things like organization, function, location, as many as you like. To set up this report, there's a couple of required organizational data fields. The first one and the most important one is called onsite days. This field should contain values ranging between 0 to 7, specifying the number of days the employee worked on site in a particular week. The data can be based on badge data. We've seen people pull it from Wi-Fi data or even tags in the HR system capturing the employee's primary work mode or their intent. Then once you've once you've uploaded those fields, you can customize the definition of what constitutes an on-site, hybrid, or mostly remote employee in your organization using the slider, depending on the average number of days that they work on site per week. And then once you've set up your report and you've managed all these settings, then what you can do is start to explore all the report pages. And I'll touch on a few of these pages in the report. The first one's called Employee Work Mode, and this page is meant to give leaders a baseline to help them manage a hybrid workforce. As your organization is trying to figure out different hybrid work models, you can revisit this page to check out if actual working patterns align. So the left-hand side shows a distribution of employees broken out by work mode and by any organizational data field of choice. So any of these pages comes with a settings button where you can switch out the group by attribute or set different filters depending on the organizational attributes you have available to you. On the right-hand side, it shows the potential differences in work modes for individual contributors versus managers, or even more senior leaders like managers. Research shows that unfortunately there tends to be a discrepancy between leadership expectations when it comes to return to work and the employee preferences, the wedge that Noah was talking about earlier. And we address this topic here because we know that it's a source of tension and may contribute to the risk of attrition. Lastly, in each of the pages of this report, you will find flyouts that allow the user to break out this information by group or to dive deeper into the trends. So in this case, what we're looking at is the trend of the share of employees that work mostly on site or hybrid or remote. So expect these to change as you update or tweak your hybrid work models. Next up is collaboration habits. In a hybrid work environment, there's a risk, unfortunately, of remote employees getting overlooked when it comes to collaboration. So on the left-hand side, what we're looking at here is how hybrid work impacts collaboration throughout the week and compares collaboration patterns for employees in different work modes. The card can also help assess whether remote and hybrid employees have equitable access to collaboration opportunities and tools. The chart on the right explores meeting engagement patterns for employees in different work modes, like how engaged are different employees in different work modes during the meeting, and should we come up with rituals or ways to make sure everybody has a way to speak up and participate in the meetings. Teams that suffer from collaboration overload, like the example that Noah just gave, can consider blocking less collaboration-heavy days as team no meeting days. So for example, on the left-hand side, it sounds like Friday might be a less collaboration-heavy day. In a take actions button or pane on every page, there is a list of suggested actions that can be taken within Viva Insights. And one of them is the action of setting up a no meeting day directly from within the product. Moving on to the connectivity and belonging page. This page focuses on how the employee work mode affects the employee's network size and composition. This is one of my favorite pages just because we know that fostering rich organizational networks can lead to greater belonging at work, as well as increased performance and lower risk of turnover. At the same time, unfortunately, studies have found that loneliness and isolation are largely reported concern among remote workers, especially. On the right-hand side of this page, what we're looking at is a metric called small group conversations. And the metric looks at meetings and calls and chats in groups smaller than 8 participants. And why 8 participants? We know that meetings and chats with 8 people or less allow everyone to be heard, allow everyone to participate and meaningfully contribute in the conversation. So it's more likely you'll make a meaningful connection in a meeting of 8 people than in a meeting of 100 people. And being seen and connected to coworkers is also a really important tenet of belonging at work. As mentioned before, each of these insights can be broken out by organization, function, or any other organizational attribute that you have available in Viva Insights. Moving on to one more important topic, the topic of work-life balance and flexible work. So how does hybrid work actually impact the employee's ability to unplug? And Noah touched upon this a couple of times. Analyzing our own remote workforce at Microsoft, we found that there's an increased risk of work bleeding into lunchtime, into what we call after hours or evenings, and even weekends. And these long hours and the pressure to always be on is definitely something that could lead to employee burnout. So leaders can use this page to understand what share of employees work during irregular hours or after hours, what we call them, but also distinguish between those that do so because they're embracing flexible schedules versus pockets of employees that are working very long hours and who might actually need help protecting the boundaries between work and life. On the left-hand side, we look at the percentage of employees that are spending more than 5 hours per week collaborating during after hours or non-traditional work hours. And we use your Outlook calendar settings to determine what is in after hours. So if mine is set from 8 to 5 and I have a meeting from 6 to 7, that would count as an after-hour meeting, for example. At the same time, we want to be conscious of people embracing these flexible schedules, right? Maybe you want to pick up your kids from school in the afternoon and do a little bit more work in the evening. So what we look at on the right-hand side is that after hours metric in combination with a metric that we call daily active connected hours, which measures sort of the distinct number of hours per day that someone either sent an email, a chat, attended a call, or a meeting. And we know if a person has more than 5 after hours collaboration per week, and they spent more than 9 hours actively connecting with their team or Outlook per day, that person is relatively overloaded, and they're probably working long, non-standard hours. Whether someone is collaborating during at least 5 hours per week, but does not have more than 9 distinct hours a day connecting with others, chances are that person is embracing a flexible schedule. So we want to make that distinction here. I'll touch on one more page before I move on to one other feature. This is a new hire onboarding page. And the question we're trying to address here is, how fast are new hires integrating in the organization networks? And are they getting the manager support they need? So again, according to Microsoft Work Lab, it's one of the links we shared earlier, new hires are 3.5 times more likely to report satisfaction if their manager plays an active role in the first few months of employment. And leaders can hence use this page to check whether new hires are getting the manager support they need on the left-hand side. And they can also look at how hybrid work impacts the integration of new hires in the organization's network. So on the right-hand side, what we look at is the average network size growth, or the average network size in the first couple of months since on hire. And we use that as a proxy for the pace at which employees are integrating in the fabric of the organization, if you will. There's one more page in this report around manager connection. Equally important, but I'm going to skip it for now, just in the interest of time, and make sure that I can touch on one more exciting feature. By the way, at the end of every report, we'll have a big behavioral trends page, which allows you to look at some of the key KPIs that we touched on in this report. Also select a baseline period and a current time period. Let's say you're implementing a change, new hybrid work models, allowing you to evaluate how it impacts some of the employee work habits or network patterns. Every report comes with a glossary, so some of the technical terms that I talked about, or the Viva insight specific terms, will be explained here. So how are these various metrics calculated is what you can find in the glossary. Also dropped a link to the documentation so that when you pick up this PowerPoint after the presentation, you'll know where to find the details to set up this report. Just going to pause here to address some questions. I saw, Tony, you have a question around, is there a place where we can see what studies show? And every page of the report, I didn't touch on it, but there's a why it matters button on every page of the report where we try to link to a research, supporting evidence, business articles, where you can find some of the statistics that Noah and I touched on. Yep, and for Stuart, we're asking what's the source data for these reports. So what we look at mainly is time spent in meetings. So they come from the Outlook calendar, emails that come from Outlook, and then Teams chats and Teams calls. Yep, and you're totally right. So this is definitely like giving us an indication of where employees spent their time. And that's also the reason why we focus mostly on knowledge workers who spend a big chunk of their time in collaboration. Yep, and then a really good question around sort of perceptions around daily active working time. A really good point. Like this by no means is actually capturing someone's, active time working at the computer. It's more connected hours. So how many distinct hours, or so what does the span of hours look like in a day that you're actively engaged with work or being always on? So maybe always on or being connected is a better representation of what that metric measures.
Additionally, Tim, I want to make sure that I address that. There is two things that I think you should explore. The privacy books, I will share those as well. We recognize that we have to make sure that employees understand what's being collected, more importantly, what's not being collected, and then that it's being used to create programs that benefit them, right? So that's one side of the coin that we deal with privacy. We don't collect any PII. We are abstracting organizational data, de-identifying it, and only reporting to managers and leaders when we have 9 or more direct reports. So we're very, very thoughtful about that. But at the same time, we've created content that you can use within your organization to explain that, not just to your leadership, but to your employees. Additionally, I've put the privacy guide in what we actually collect in what some people see is just their personal insight. So like, for example, if I'm measuring my sentiment or if I'm doing certain things, my manager's not seeing all of my personal things, just like with an exchange, it's cashed to my local store and it's deleted every 90 days. So I'm sorry, 5 or more. I always forget that it's changed. Thank you for the catch. 5 or more. So I hope that helps address, Tim, some of the questions you had on privacy. Thanks, Aileen.
Perfect. All right. definitely hold some of these questions, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to touch on one more exciting feature that is going to come up. So going to switch gears to a feature called the Shared in Office Day Plan. And this feature is currently in development and slated to be released later this semester. So this is the part where I'll give you a little bit of a preview of what's coming later this year. So as mentioned earlier, the Shared in Office Day Plan is meant to help individuals and also managers coordinate when to work from the office together. Let me walk you through what that would look like for a user. Starting with, where would you be able to find this plan? Plan will be discoverable either through your Viva Insights Digest email, and you may have seen that coming in your Outlook, or in the Viva Insights application in Teams. If you haven't tried out the application, I highly recommend that you download it, check it out. You can find it in Teams in your sort of app store within Teams. Once you click on one of these cards, so either in the email or on the app homepage, it will present you with the details on how this plan works. Once the user clicks Get Started, you will get the chance to invite participants to your plan. And typically those are colleagues that go into the same office together or at least in the same area. And you get to suggest one or multiple days of the week to come into the office together and add a personal note. Once you share out the plan, your plan participants or colleagues will be notified. And this is an example of what such a notification could look like in Teams, for example. The participants can then choose to either join or dismiss your plan. And after they accept the plan, their status will automatically be updated to in office on the days of the week that you propose to go into the office together. The in-office day status will be reflected in both Outlook Calendar, and in Teams. So to enable this, we are working very closely with the Teams and Outlook product groups that are rolling out this new work location feature later this year as well. So for some of you who might be in the private rings, you'll start to see an option show up underneath your icon in Teams, but also in Outlook, to set your work location on particular days. Lastly, it's important to note that participants can leave this plan at any time, and organizers of the plan can change it or cancel the plan at any moment in time. So that's all I had to share with you in terms of product features. And before we talk about some of the resources that are available to you, I want to open it up for a few more questions.
Florine, can you talk to the one question that Tony posted about seeing organizational trends for teams with 10 or more?
Yeah, great question, Tony. So we have different product services. So there is the digest email with insights for leaders, organizational insights. We have organizational insights in the Teams app, and then there's these analyst reports. So anything that shows up in the app would be available to managers with a team of at least 10 or more people. So what Noah was referring to earlier is our Power BI reports that are only available to Viva Insights analysts. Typically, that's a handful of people that have gone through some privacy training and some data handling agreements and protocols to set up these reports, where the minimum threshold is 5, but you can set it to 10 or 15 or whatever you like from there. But in our out-of-the-box product, if you will, in the app, the minimum is set to 10.
And then we had another question. Thank you for that. Another question. Great question, David. A sense for blue collars or mobile profiles. So yes, it is a mobile first experience, and the frontline worker and the blue collar have been very, very important. So when we talk to you about your culture and we talk to you about the configuration, we take into account that persona of user has very different needs. So happy to talk to you about that. But yes, we have optimized the experience to teams on a mobile device. Regardless of what that mobile device is, the experience remains optimized.
Good point.
Okay, looks like we have a question from Marianne. This is rolled out. this is available?
The first hybrid work report is rolled out and available today. The shared in office day plan is slated to be released around summertime. So second half of this half of the year. Quarter, yeah. Trimester. It's messing me up. So second quarter of this half year. Yeah. All right. A non-insights question. The name is that about to roll out soon? Actually, that's a really interesting question. Isis, do you know, Noah, if we're planning anything like that?
I know that by default, when I build my Teams profile, I have an option to identify, and that's something that we built into the culture. So I don't know if that's something that I would assume it's probably something that's set up on configuration. But I can look into it. It's a great question. I'm just so used to seeing it that I would suspect it came from the default configuration that our HR leadership decided to push down when we would build our Teams profiles. But let's confirm that. More detailed breakdown explaining what features available based on licensing. So this is Viva Insights Premium with the Advanced Power BI plugin. That's what's required to run this. So that would be a full license of Viva Insights for everybody in the organization that you're going to include in this query, as well as Power BI, as well as, the Advanced Insights Power BI plugin for those users who are those analysts who are going to be, seeing these reports. Yes, Aileen.
Sorry, is this the same as Viva Insights Advanced Analytics, what used to be Workplace Analytics?
Yes, it is.
Is this going to be renamed again with Viva Insights Premium?
No, it's the same. This is Viva Insights Advanced Analytics with Power BI. But when we talk licensing, and I'm so sorry, we are plagued with the same language. When I talk licensing, there is a seeded personal insights that will come with everything that you're seeing in your versions of Exchange and Outlook, and that is a freemium feature. And then the organizational is the premium, right? So there's Insights Premium and then there's seeded. So I just want to make sure on the licensing side you understood the difference. That's all. But the product will not be renamed. No.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because I know, all the licenses that we've seen and that because we're going through this as a pilot right now. I just wanted to make sure that there's not yet another one that's actually called Insights Premium that is then different from Advanced Analytics. Just making sure.
It is the same.
No, great
It
question.
is the same. Yes.
We
Good,
absolutely confuse ourselves sometimes with all these naming changes,
right?
but it's Viva Insights now, and yes, Advanced Insights is what we were looking at.
Perfect. Thank you.
Of course.
Oh yeah, David. Yeah, good question. Okay, so Admin Center. Yes, so all our data, it's good to know that it's never identifiable. So all our information is hashed, and we show the insights in an aggregated fashion. So either using a minimum group size of 5 or 9, depending on where you find the information. But what you can do in Viva Insights, which is not possible in Admin Center, is actually break this out by organizational attributes. So depending on what organizational attributes you decide to upload, organization, function, location, you can break out this information. Not sure if that addresses your question.
I guess there's another question that will the shared and day office day plan be available to all the basic licensed users?
The shared and office day plan also requires a premium license, at least to set up the plan. Good nuance to point out is if I have a premium license, I set up the plan and I invite someone who does not have a premium license, they can still join my plan. So for participants, it's a little bit different. But to be able to set it up, you need it. Yeah.
So it looks like, Anthony, my assumption was right, that we're drinking our own Kool-Aid by testing it out before we release it. So thank you for posting and confirming that. It's hard to keep track of all the great technology that's being rolled out. So I appreciate the allyship there.
All right. Any other questions? Please come off the mute and yeah, you can ask your questions. We still have some time before we wrap up our session. All right. Okay, let me just quickly launch our next poll as we move ahead. And please feel free to, put on your other questions also on the Teams chat. So this is the question which is like having poll questions into the one, three questions into the one poll. So would love your feedback on this one. Okay, so this was the basic poll question that had launched currently, just to understand whether the feature coverage was just right, session met the expectations, and would any one of you like to have these capabilities enabled for the organization. So we do see there are 16 responses, so that's good. Oh, still see that people are still responding. Wow. Let me see the last one. Okay, so that's good. We really have almost the rating is around 4.5, which is great to see that they would like to have the hybrid workplace experiences enabled for the organizations. Awesome. So as we are almost at the time, let me go ahead. So as you go have gone through today's session on the hybrid workplace capabilities, so here are a few of the links and the resources and the leave behinds for you to learn more about these capabilities, and to help you out with the adoption of these capabilities. So there are details about how you can set up your ways of working, and hybrid workplace Power BI reports into your analyst workbench, more details about shared in person day plan, which Florine had covered, and then more details on the adoption flipbook that we have for Viva Insights, which covers really great details on the adoption guidelines, customer success stories, and all the adoption related assets. So going to the next slide. Now, as you have gone through this session, and say if you would want to learn more about hybrid workplace experiences, or say try out, pilot, or deploy it, or need any assistance for say adoption or any of the deployment blockers, we have our set of offerings available. So say if you want to learn more, or need like one-to-one assistance to get more like deep dive details about these capabilities, we have our technical readiness sessions for our IT teams and for our business owners. So that is Journey to Viva Insights. That's an 8 hours offering that is delivered by our engineers. We also have our EBC sessions that could be scheduled for your customers. So, say if you want to have any of these, please reach out to your Microsoft representative. Say if you want to proceed further to need for any assistance for the deployment and the pilot part of this capabilities, we have our fast track or to support for for the deployment purposes. So let us know, and we could ensure that we have our request being raised to have that assistance provided. And same goes for the partner offering or workshops delivered by engineering. When it comes to adoption, your CSMs that you're in touch with are your go-to person. So get in touch with them once you roll out these capabilities to have an adoption campaign, set it up for your organization. And in means of in any of these stages, like say even for pilot or deployment, if you're facing any blockers, we do have our internal programs set up to help our customers and our CSMs. So please feel free to raise the request for any feature gaps or any feature request or any blockers, so that we could provide you timely assistance. And with that, let me launch another poll so that we can get that intel from you, and we can ensure that we provide you those assistance for training and deployment. So would love to you'd love to know your feedback, that if you need any deployment assistance, or any if you would want to have a pilot for Viva Insights, or if you want to have a business decision maker trainings or IT decision maker trainings for Viva Insights, please feel free to submit the responses, so that we could ensure that we have your Microsoft representative reach out to you and provide you that assistance. Awesome. So as I see, folks are still responding. So we have set up this process that after this session, we'll have all this intel being provided to the Microsoft representative so that they can reach out to you and then, accelerate you to the next stage. Great. So we are at the time now. Thanks, Florine, and thanks, Nova, for the great session. I'm sure all would have great takeaways from this session, and uh, I would see all of you in our next session. That's on 22nd Feb, which is on improve your organization productivity and collaboration pattern.
Thanks everyone for joining. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. And I'll again share within the meeting chat the superheroes link so that you can join that community and you can continue your discussions over there and get access to the slides and the recording. Thank you so much and see you all next week. Thanks again, Florine and Noah. Have a great
Thank
day
you.
ahead,
Have
everyone.
a great rest of the week, everyone. Bye-bye.